Clara pressed her daughter's face against her chest to muffle the silence. Rosie had stopped crying yesterday. After 5 days without food, her 4-year-old had nothing left, no tears, no strength, no sound. That silence terrified Clara more than any scream ever could. She stood barefoot in the November cold, 7 cents clutched in her bleeding palm, staring through the frost-covered window of Harper's General Store. Inside, families bought bread, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Outside, her baby was dying. If you want to follow Clara and Rosie's journey to the very end, subscribe to my channel and drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Let me see how far this story travels. Clara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She counted the coins again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 cents. She'd counted them 40 times since dawn, hoping somehow the number would change. It never did. Rosie stirred against her chest. The movement was so weak, Clara barely felt it. Her daughter had lost so much weight in the past month that holding her felt like holding air. "Mama?" Rosie's voice came out as a whisper. "Hungry." Clara's throat closed. "I know, baby. I know. Mama's gonna fix it." She didn't know how. She'd sold everything: her wedding ring 3 weeks ago, her mother's china 2 weeks ago, her winter coat last Tuesday. The 7 cents in her palm were the last pieces of a life that had crumbled to dust since the mine took Samuel. The bell above Harper's General Store door chimed as a well-dressed woman stepped out carrying a basket overflowing with bread, cheese, and fresh milk. She didn't even glance at Clara and Rosie huddled against the building. Clara watched her go. 3 months ago, that woman had been her neighbor. They'd shared recipes and complained about the dust together. Now she walked past like Clara was invisible. "Please, God," Clara whispered against Rosie's hair. "Just help me feed my baby. That's all I'm asking. Just help me feed her." She pushed through the door. The warmth hit her like a wall. For one terrible moment, Clara's knees buckled from the relief of being out of the cold. She caught herself on a shelf drawing stares from the customers inside. Mrs. Harper looked up from behind the counter. Her eyes swept over Clara's bare feet, her tattered dress, the child limp in her arms. Something in her expression hardened. "Clara Whitmore." Her voice carried across the store. "I thought I made myself clear last week." Clara stepped forward. "Please, ma'am, I have 7 cents. Maybe some bread ends. The pieces you throw out. My daughter hasn't eaten in 5 days. Mrs. Harper cut her off. "Yes, you told me that yesterday, and the day before." "Because it's true." "And I told you we don't give charity here." Mrs. Harper's chin lifted. "Hard work builds character. Handouts destroy it." Clara felt the familiar burn of humiliation crawl up her neck. Every eye in the store was on her now. She recognized most of the faces women she'd sat next to and churchmen who'd tipped their hats to her when Samuel was alive. None of them moved to help. "I ain't asking for charity." Clara kept her voice steady. "I'm asking to buy bread ends with 7 cents, and I'm asking to work for whatever else my daughter needs. I can scrub floors, wash dishes, mend clothes, anything." A woman near the pickle barrel whispered to her companion. Clara caught the words clearly. "Shouldn't have children if you can't feed them." Clara's hands tightened around Rosie. "I had a husband who provided for us just fine until your husband's mind collapsed on him, Mrs. Patterson." The woman's face went red. "How dare you?" 3 months. Clara's voice shook, but she didn't look away. 3 months ago, I had a home, a husband, a life. Then the Westbrook Mining Company killed my Samuel and threw us out of our house the day after his funeral. Said the housing was for working families. As if I hadn't scrubbed and mended and worked myself raw trying to keep us alive since then. Silence fell over the store. Mrs. Harper cleared her throat. "Be that as it may, this is a business, not a—" The door behind Clara opened. She felt the shift in the room before she saw him. The whispers stopped. Even Mrs. Harper's lecture died mid-sentence. Clara turned to see what had caused such a reaction. A man stood in the doorway, blocking most of the gray winter light behind him. He was tall, taller than any man Clara had ever seen. His shoulders filled the doorframe completely. Deep lines carved his face, speaking of years spent under harsh sun and harder losses. His hands, hanging loose at his sides, looked like they could break steel. But it was his eyes that stopped Clara's breath. Gray. Storm, gray, and filled with a pain so deep it made her own grief feel shallow. "Mr. McAllister?" Mrs. Harper's voice had changed completely. Respect. Maybe even fear. "What can I get for you today?" The man McAllister didn't answer. His gaze had fixed on Rosie's face. Clara instinctively pulled her daughter closer. She'd learned in the past 3 months that men who stared at desperate women usually wanted something, and she had nothing left to give. But McAllister didn't move toward her. He just stood there frozen, staring at her dying child with an expression that looked almost like recognition. His jaw trembled. Clara watched in disbelief as this mountain of a man, this stranger who'd made an entire store full of people go silent, swallowed hard. His massive hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, and something in his storm-gray eyes cracked open. "How long?" His voice came out rough, deep, like thunder rolling across distant hills. Clara blinked. "What?" "How long since she ate?" "5 days." McAllister closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. Clara had never seen a grown man cry before. Not even Samuel, when they'd buried his mother. But tears were sliding down this stranger's weathered cheeks as he stared at Rosie's pale, motionless face. "Josiah," Mrs. Harper's voice had softened slightly. "You don't need to—" "How much?" He cut her off without looking away from Rosie. "I'm sorry." "Milk, bread, broth. Whatever a child needs to survive." McAllister finally turned to face Mrs. Harper, and something in his expression made her step back. "How much for all of it?" Mrs. Harper's mouth opened and closed. "Well, that would be several dollars and—" McAllister pulled a leather wallet from his coat. Clara's eyes widened. She hadn't seen that much money since Samuel was alive. Maybe not even then. He counted out bills onto the counter. More money than Clara had seen in months. "Fill a basket. Everything she needs." "Josiah, surely you don't mean to encourage this sort of fill the basket." Mrs. Harper's face flushed red, but she didn't argue. She began pulling items from shelves: bread, milk, cheese, a jar of honey-dried meat. Clara stood frozen, not understanding what was happening. Men didn't just help strangers, not without wanting something in return. She'd learned that lesson too many times in the past 3 months. "Why?" she whispered. McAllister finally looked at her. Really looked not just at Rosie, but at Clara herself. She saw him take in her bare feet, her cracked lips, the dark circles under her eyes. "Because someone should have," he said simply. The basket was full now. McAllister picked it up like it weighed nothing, then turned toward the door. "Wait." Clara's voice cracked. "I can't. I don't have any way to repay you. I won't take charity. I can't." "Then don't call it charity." He paused at the door, not quite looking at her. "Call it one person helping another survive the winter. That ain't charity. That's just being human." He walked out. Clara stood there for a long moment, the warmth of the store pressing against her skin, the stares of the other customers pressing against her pride. Then Rosie stirred in her arms. "Mama, hungry." Clara made her choice. She followed him out into the cold. McAllister was loading the basket into a wagon hitched to 2 strong horses. He didn't seem surprised to see her. "Get in," he said quietly, nodding toward the wagon seat. "Your feet are bleeding." Clara looked down. She hadn't noticed, but he was right. The cold had numbed her so completely she couldn't feel the cuts anymore. I don't know you." She clutched Rosie tighter. "I don't know where you're taking us, or what you want, or—" "Josiah McAllister." He turned to face her fully. "I own a ranch about 10 miles from here. I ain't taking you anywhere you don't want to go. But your daughter is dying, ma'am. And I've got warm rooms and hot food and a doctor who owes me a favor. So you can stand there and let your pride kill her, or you can get in the wagon." His words hit her like a slap. Clara felt tears burn her eyes. "I ain't proud," she whispered. "I begged for scraps in that store. I sold my wedding ring. I ain't got no pride left." "Then what's stopping you?" "I don't understand why you'd help us." McAllister was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Rougher. Like the words were being dragged out of him. "2 years ago I had a wife. And a little girl about your daughter's age." He paused. "They died in a fire. I was in the barn. I heard Mary screaming. By the time I got to the house—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I couldn't save them." Clara felt her heart crack. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was inadequate. She knew it was inadequate. But what else could she say? "I ain't telling you this for sympathy." McAllister's jaw tightened. "I'm telling you because I spent 2 years thinking God was punishing me, that I deserved to live alone with my guilt forever." He looked at Rosie. "Then I walked into that store and saw your daughter's face, and I thought, maybe this is why I'm still here. Maybe I couldn't save them, but I can save her." Rosie's eyes fluttered open. They focused on McAllister's face for a moment, then drifted closed again. "Get in the wagon," he said softly. "Please." Clara climbed up. Her hands shook as she settled Rosie on her lap. McAllister handed her a small bottle of milk from the basket. "Try to get her to drink, just a little at first. Too much too fast will make her sick." Clara brought the bottle to Rosie's lips. For a terrible moment there was no response. Her daughter's mouth didn't move. Her eyes didn't open. Then, like some deep instinct awakening, Rosie's lips parted. She managed a few weak swallows before exhaustion claimed her again. But those few drops were like watching someone come back from the dead. "Thank you." Clara's voice broke. I can't." "Don't thank me yet." McAllister climbed up to the driver's seat. "We've got a long ride ahead, and your daughter needs a lot more than a few sips of milk to survive." He clicked his tongue and the horses began to move. Clara watched Mineral Springs shrink behind them. The general store where she'd been humiliated. The boarding house that had thrown them out last week. The church where she'd prayed every night for 3 months without answer. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked quietly. "My ranch. It's called Broken Ridge." "Why Broken Ridge?" McAllister was quiet for a long moment. "Because that's what I was when I named it." They traveled in silence for nearly an hour. Clara focused on Rosie trickling more milk into her daughter's mouth whenever she stirred. Slowly, impossibly, color began to return to Rosie's cheeks. "She's a fighter," McAllister said, his eyes on the road ahead. "Like her mama." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I ain't no fighter. I'm just too stubborn to die." "That's the same thing." She studied his profile, the hard jaw, the deep lines around his eyes, the scar on his left forearm that looked like it came from a burn. "You tried to save them," she said quietly. "That scar." His hands tightened on the reins. "Tried ain't the same as did." "No, but trying matters." "Does it?" He glanced at her. "They're still dead." Clara didn't have an answer for that. She understood that kind of guilt, the kind that logic couldn't touch, that forgiveness couldn't reach. She'd felt it every time Rosie cried from hunger. "What was her name?" she asked softly. "Your daughter." Something flickered across his face. Pain. Memory. Love. "Lily." His voice was barely a whisper. She had her mother's smile, and my stubbornness. How old was she? 5. She'd have been 7 now. Rosie stirred in Clara's arms, mumbling something in her sleep. McAllister's eyes dropped to her face, and Clara saw his expression soften in a way that made her chest ache. "Your husband," he said after a moment. "What was he like?" "Samuel." Clara smiled despite herself. "He was a dreamer, always talking about striking it rich, building us a proper house, giving Rosie everything she deserved. He never did have much luck, but he had enough hope for both of us." "How'd he die?" "Mine collapse. Westbrook Mining says it was an accident, but half the men in town knew those tunnels weren't safe. They just didn't want to spend the money to shore them up proper." McAllister's jaw tightened. "And they threw you out of your home. Company housing. When you stop being useful to the company, you stop being worth their concern." The bitterness in Clara's voice surprised her. Samuel was barely cold in the ground when they came with the eviction notice. "What about family?" "Samuel has a brother in Cheyenne, Cornelius. He's a lawyer. Wrote me after the funeral saying he'd look into the situation, and then I never heard from him again." Clara shook her head. "I don't know if he even got my letters asking for help. Mail's not reliable out here." "And your people?" "My parents are dead, no siblings. I came west with Samuel because I had nothing to stay in Ohio for." McAllister nodded slowly. "So it's just you and Rosie." "It's just us." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "It ain't just you anymore." Clara looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've got a place to stay now. For as long as you need it. No strings, no expectations, just a place to stay." "Why would you do that for strangers?" McAllister finally turned to meet her eyes. "Because strangers are just people you haven't helped yet." Before Clara could respond, Rosie opened her eyes. "Mama?" Her voice was still weak, but stronger than it had been in days. Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Rosie's gaze drifted to McAllister. Her small brow furrowed. "Who's the big man?" "Despite everything?" Clara laughed. "His name is Mr. McAllister. He's helping us." Rosie studied him with the unfiltered honesty of a child. "You're big like a mountain." The corner of McAllister's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "I reckon I am." "Why do you look so sad, Mr. Mountain?" Clara's breath caught. She opened her mouth to apologize, but McAllister spoke first. "Because I miss someone," he said quietly. "Someone who was about your size." Rosie considered this. "Did they go away?" "They went to heaven." "Oh." Rosie nodded solemnly. "My papa went to heaven too. Mama cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping." Clara's face burned. "Rosie." "It's okay, Mama. I cry too sometimes." Rosie looked back at McAllister. "Do you cry, Mr. Mountain?" The question hung in the cold air. Clara watched McAllister's massive hands grip the reins until his knuckles went white. "Sometimes," he admitted, "when nobody's watching." "Mama says it's okay to cry. She says it means you loved somebody real hard." McAllister's voice came out rough. "Your mama sounds like a smart woman." Rosie yawned suddenly, her small burst of energy fading. "I'm tired, Mama." "I know, baby. Go back to sleep. We're going somewhere warm." Rosie's eyes drifted to McAllister one more time. "Mr. Mountain, yes. Thank you for the milk. It was good." Something in McAllister's face shifted. Something that had been locked away for a long time cracked open just slightly. "You're welcome, little one." Rosie's eyes closed, and within moments, she was asleep again. Clara sat in silence watching the landscape roll past. Snow had begun to fall, light flurries that dusted the ground white. The cold was bitter, but she barely noticed it now. "She's remarkable," McAllister said quietly. "Your daughter. She's all I have left. I know the feeling." They rode on. When the ranch finally came into view, Clara's breath caught. It wasn't the rough cabin she'd expected. It was a real house 2 stories tall, with a wraparound porch. Smoke curled from the chimney. The whole place looked like somewhere people had been happy. But as they drew closer, Clara noticed details that made her chest ache. A small wooden swing in the front yard, its ropes frayed from weather. A child's rocking horse on the porch, its paint peeling. Toys scattered in the garden, faded by seasons of sun and rain. McAllister saw her looking. "I couldn't bring myself to put them away," he said quietly. "Mary always said a house should look lived in." Clara understood. She still had Samuel's coat hanging by the door of every place they'd stayed. She couldn't bear to sell it even when they were starving. "This is Broken Ridge," McAllister said, guiding the wagon toward the house. "This is home." Home. Clara hadn't had a home in 3 months. She'd forgotten what the word felt like. McAllister helped her down from the wagon, his hands careful and respectful. Then he led them up the porch steps and pushed open the front door. The inside of the house made Clara's throat close. Everything was clean and well maintained. A fire crackled in the hearth. But like the yard outside the house felt frozen in time. In the kitchen, a small table was set for 3 people, the plates covered with a thin layer of dust. Children's books were stacked on a shelf. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a family portrait. Clara moved toward it without meaning to. The woman in the picture had kind eyes and a gentle smile, holding a little girl who looked about 5 years old. The child had her father's gray eyes and her mother's delicate features. Both of them looked at the camera with the confidence of people who believed they had all the time in the world. And behind them stood McAllister. His hand rested protectively on his wife's shoulder, and his face held a happiness that was completely absent now. "Mary and Lily," he said softly, coming to stand beside her. "They died in the fire. I was in the barn when it started. I heard Mary screaming. By the time I reached the house, the whole thing was—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I tried to break down the door. I tried to—" His voice cracked. Clara reached out and touched his sleeve gently. "You don't have to explain. I couldn't save them." The words came out broken. "I couldn't save my own wife and daughter." Rosie stirred in Clara's arms, her eyes opening again. She looked at the portrait, then at McAllister. "Is that your little girl?" she asked softly. "The one who went to heaven?" McAllister's jaw trembled. "Yes." "She was pretty, like a princess." "She was." His voice was barely audible. "She was my princess." Rosie reached out one small hand and touched McAllister's weathered fingers. "I'm sorry your little girl went to heaven, Mr. Mountain. But maybe—" She yawned. "Maybe you can help me and Mama instead. Until you're not so sad anymore." Clara's heart stopped. McAllister stood frozen, staring at the tiny hand holding his massive fingers. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. Then, something broke open in his storm-gray eyes. "Yeah." He whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Yeah, maybe I can do that." He knelt down to Rosie's level, his weathered face gentle in a way that made Clara's chest ache. "How about we get you some hot food, little one, and a warm bed? You think you'd like that?" Rosie nodded sleepily. "That sounds nice, Mr. Mountain." McAllister looked up at Clara. His eyes were red-rimmed, but something in his expression had shifted. The pain was still there. She didn't think it would ever fully leave, but now there was something else too. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but unmistakably present. "The guest room is upstairs," he said quietly. "Clean sheets, warm blankets. There's a bath if you want one, and I'll heat some broth for both of you." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Mr. McAllister." "Josiah." He stood his height towering over her, but his presence somehow gentle. "Call me Josiah." "Josiah." The name felt strange in her mouth, too intimate for a stranger. But this man had already done more for her than anyone had in 3 months. "I don't know how to thank you for this." "Then don't." He turned toward the kitchen. "Just let me help. That's all I'm asking." That evening, Clara sat by the fire with Rosie curled in her lap, both of them warm and full for the first time in longer than she could remember. Josiah had made broth simple but nourishing, and Rosie had managed to eat more than she had in weeks. Now she was sleeping peacefully, her small face relaxed in a way Clara hadn't seen since before Samuel died. Josiah sat across from them, carving something out of a piece of wood. His massive hands moved with surprising delicacy, shaping the wood into something that looked like it might become a doll. Clara watched him work, thinking about everything that had happened that day. This morning she'd been standing outside Harper's General Store with 7 cents and a dying child. Now she was sitting in a warm house with a full stomach and a stranger who was carving toys for her daughter. "Josiah," she said quietly. He looked up. "Yeah. Why were you in town today?" "You said you live 10 miles out. That's a long ride just for supplies." Josiah's hands stilled on the wood. For a long moment, he didn't answer. "Today's the anniversary," he finally said. 2 years since the fire. I come to town every year on this day because I can't bear to be in this house alone with the memories." He paused. "Usually I go to the saloon, drink until I can't think anymore. But this year, I don't know. Something made me go to Harper's instead." Clara felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "If you'd gone to the saloon instead, I know." They sat in silence, the weight of that coincidence, or maybe not coincidence, hanging between them. "Maybe God does answer prayers," Clara whispered. "Just not the way we expect." Josiah's storm-gray eyes met hers across the firelight. "Maybe he does." Rosie stirred in Clara's lap, mumbling something in her sleep. Both adults looked down at her, and something passed between them. An understanding, a shared grief, and perhaps the smallest seed of something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white. And inside the ranch house called Broken Ridge, 2 broken people and 1 small child began the slow, fragile process of becoming a family. Clara woke to the smell of coffee. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft. The blankets were too warm. The silence was too peaceful. Then she remembered. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding. Rosie. Where was Rosie? The space beside her was empty. The blankets were thrown back. Her daughter was gone. Clara was out of bed and down the stairs before she could think. Her bare feet hit the cold wooden floor, but she didn't care. Panic clawed at her chest as she burst into the kitchen and stopped. Rosie sat at the kitchen table, a glass of milk in front of her, and honey smeared across her cheeks. Josiah stood at the stove, his massive frame somehow made less intimidating by the apron tied around his waist. "Mama?" Rosie's face lit up. "Mr. Mountain made pancakes, real pancakes with honey." Clara's legs nearly gave out beneath her. She grabbed the doorframe, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Josiah turned, concern flashing across his weathered features. "You all right?" "I woke up and she was gone." Clara's voice shook. "I thought she came down about an hour ago. Said she was hungry." Josiah's voice was gentle. "I should have told you. I'm sorry." Clara shook her head, pressing a hand to her racing heart. "No, I'm not used to..." "Not used to someone else looking after her." She met his eyes. "Not used to anyone helping at all." Josiah held her gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "There's coffee on the stove. And pancakes if you're hungry." Clara moved to the table on unsteady legs. Rosie immediately began chattering about her breakfast, about the horses she'd seen through the window, about the snow that had piled up overnight. Her voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Her cheeks had color again. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Mama, why are you crying?" Rosie's brow furrowed. "Are you sad?" "No, baby." Clara wiped her cheeks quickly. I'm happy. Sometimes people cry when they're happy too. Rosie considered this. That's confusing. Yeah. Clara laughed softly. It is. Josiah set a plate of pancakes in front of her. His hand brushed her shoulder briefly, a gesture so small she might have imagined it. Eat, he said gruffly. You're too thin. Clara looked down at the food. Real food. More than she'd seen in months. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but something held her back. What's wrong? Josiah asked. Nothing, She hesitated. I keep waiting for the catch. The catch? Men don't just help women like me without wanting something. The words came out harder than she intended. I've learned that lesson too many times since Samuel died. Josiah pulled out a chair and sat across from her. His storm gray eyes were steady. What did they want? Clara's face burned. Does it matter? It matters to me. She looked down at her hands. The calluses, the cracked skin, the places where her wedding ring used to be. The boarding house owner said I could stay if I was friendly to his guests. A rancher outside town offered me work, but the work wasn't what he described. Even the minister suggested I could earn the church's charity if I was grateful enough. Her voice went flat. So forgive me if I'm suspicious of kindness, Mr. McAllister. In my experience, it always comes with a price. The silence that followed was heavy. When Clara finally looked up, she expected to see pity in Josiah's face, or worse, interest. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like rage. Who? His voice was low, dangerous. What? The boarding house owner, the rancher, the minister. Josiah's hands had curled into fists on the table. Give me their names. Clara blinked. Why? Because men like that don't deserve to breathe the same air as you. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. This wasn't false chivalry or empty words. This was genuine anger on her behalf. It doesn't matter now, she said quietly. I survived. That's all that counts. It matters. Josiah's jaw tightened. And for the record, Mrs. Whitmore, I ain't those men. I ain't ever gonna be those men. You and Rosie are safe here. That's a promise. Rosie, who had been quietly eating her pancakes, looked up. Mr. Mountain. Yeah, little one. Are you and Mama fighting? Josiah's expression softened instantly. No, we're just talking. Good, because I like it here. Rosie took another bite of pancake. It's warm, and there's food, and you make Mama less scared. Clara's heart clenched. She hadn't realized how much her fear had shown. I'm not scared, baby. Yes, you are. Rosie's voice was matter-of-fact. You've been scared since Papa went to heaven. But you're less scared now, I can tell. Out of the mouths of children. Clara looked at Josiah and found him watching her with those storm-gray eyes. Something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. Eat your pancakes, Mrs. Whitmore, he said quietly, before they get cold. Clara picked up her fork. The morning passed in a blur of small discoveries. Clara learned that Josiah ran the ranch mostly alone. Now he'd let most of the hands go after the fire, unable to bear company. She learned that he raised horses, not cattle, and that his stock was famous across 3 territories. She also learned that he hadn't touched his wife's things. The bedroom at the end of the hall remained exactly as Mary had left it. Clara glimpsed it through a half-open door. A woman's brush on the dresser, a dress hanging in the closet, a book lying open on the nightstand, as if its reader had just stepped away. And Lucy's room. The door was closed, but Clara had seen Josiah pause outside it that morning, his hand resting on the wood like he was touching a grave marker. He goes in there sometimes, a small voice said. Clara turned to find Rosie standing behind her, a wooden horse clutched in her hands. What baby? Mr. Mountain. He goes in the little girl's room sometimes. I saw him last night when I couldn't sleep. Rosie's voice dropped to a whisper. He was sitting on the bed crying. Clara's chest ached. You shouldn't spy on people, Rosie. I wasn't spying. I was thirsty. Rosie looked down at the wooden horse. He gave me this. He said it was hers, but she'd want me to have it. Clara knelt down to her daughter's level. That was very kind of him. Mama is Mr. Mountain lonely. I think so, baby. Very lonely. Like us. Clara smoothed Rosie's hair back from her face. Yeah, like us. Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe we can be lonely together. That's better than being lonely alone, right? Before Clara could answer, the front door opened. Josiah's boots echoed on the floor as he came in from outside, stomping snow off his feet. His face was grim. There's a rider coming up the road. Clara's stomach dropped. Who? Can't tell yet, but whoever it is, they're coming fast. Clara gathered Rosie close, her heart hammering. In her experience, people who came fast brought bad news. Josiah moved to the window, his hand resting near the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Stay here. Josiah. I said stay here. He went out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Clara held Rosie tight, listening to the sound of hoofbeats growing closer. She heard voices, Josiah's deep rumble, and another voice higher, more urgent. Then the door opened again. Josiah stood there with an older man Clara didn't recognize. The stranger had a medical bag in his hand and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Clara, this is Doc Webb, Josiah said. He's here to look at Rosie. Clara's fear transformed into confusion. You called a doctor. I told you last night he owes me a favor. Josiah nodded toward Rosie. I want to make sure she's healing properly. Doc Webb stepped forward with a gentle smile. Mrs. Whitmore, Josiah sent word this morning. Said you had a little one who needed looking after. Clara's throat tightened. He'd sent for a doctor. Without being asked. Without expecting anything in return. Thank you, she managed. Doc Webb knelt down to Rosie's level. Well now, who do we have here? I'm Rosie. Her daughter's voice was shy but curious. Are you really a doctor? I really am. Would you let me listen to your heart? Make sure it's beating nice and strong. Rosie looked up at Clara for permission. Clara nodded, and her daughter turned back to the doctor with a solemn expression. Okay, but be careful. Mama says my heart is special. Doc Webb's eyes crinkled. I'm sure it is, little one. I'm sure it is. While the doctor examined Rosie, Clara found herself standing beside Josiah near the window. Neither of them spoke, but the silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. You didn't have to do this, Clara said quietly. Yeah, I did. Why? Josiah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because 2 years ago, I would have given everything I owned for someone to help my family. But there was nobody. Nobody came. He paused. I ain't gonna be that person who doesn't come. Not ever again. Clara felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been frozen since Samuel died beginning to thaw. She's malnourished but recovering well, Doc Webb announced, straightening up from his examination. The milk and food are doing their job. Another week of regular meals and rest and she'll be good as new. Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. Thank God. I'd also recommend keeping her warm and quiet. No excitement. Doc Webb's eyes flickered to Josiah meaningfully. Though I suspect excitement might be hard to avoid given the circumstances. What circumstances? Clara asked sharply. Doc Webb and Josiah exchanged a look. Tell her, the doctor said quietly. She deserves to know. Clara's stomach clenched. Tell me what? Josiah ran a hand over his face. When I went to Harper's yesterday, I wasn't alone. Half the town saw me help you, saw me put you in my wagon and drive you out here. So people talk, Clara, And in a town like Mineral Springs, talk spreads fast. His jaw tightened. By now, everyone knows you're staying here, and they're not happy about it. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. What do you mean not happy? Doc Webb sighed. What he means, Mrs. Whitmore, is that the town's moral guardians have decided that an unmarried woman living under an unmarried man's roof is a scandal that cannot be tolerated. Mrs. Harper has already organized a committee to address the situation, and Sheriff Gaines has been making noises about the child's welfare. Rosie's welfare. Clara's voice rose. I'm her mother. Who are they to? They're the people with power in this town, Doc Webb said gently. And they've decided that a mother who can't provide for her child might not be fit to keep her. Clara felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. They want to take Rosie. They want to place her in a proper Christian home. Doc Webb's voice was bitter. Which means the orphanage in Cheyenne more than likely. No. The word came out fierce, primal. No, they can't. She's my daughter. She's all I have. Josiah stepped forward. Nobody's taking anyone anywhere, not while I'm standing. Josiah. Doc Webb's voice was warning. You can't fight the whole town. Watch me. Clara looked between the two men, her mind racing. This was supposed to be safety. This was supposed to be escape. Instead, she'd brought trouble to this man's door. I should go, she said suddenly. We should leave. If we're not here, there's no scandal. And go where? Josiah's voice was sharp. Back to sleeping in barns. Back to watching your daughter starve. At least she'd be with me. She won't be with anyone if she's dead. Clara. The words hung in the air between them. Rosie started crying. Clara closed her eyes, fighting back tears of her own. This was all falling apart. Everything was falling apart. Mama, are the bad people going to take me away? Clara gathered her daughter into her arms, pressing her face against Rosie's hair. No, baby. Nobody's taking you anywhere. I promise. Your mama's right, Josiah said quietly, kneeling down beside them. Nobody's taking you, Rosie. I won't let them. Rosie looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Promise. I promise. Doc Webb cleared his throat. There might be a way to settle this. A way to give the town nothing to complain about. What way? Clara asked. The doctor's eyes flickered between her and Josiah. A legal arrangement. One that would make Mrs. Whitmore's presence here respectable. Clara felt her cheeks flush as she understood his meaning. You can't be serious. I ain't suggesting anything, Doc Webb said quickly. Just pointing out options. Marriage would silence the gossips and protect the child. That's all I'm saying. We've known each other for 1 day. People out here have married for less. That doesn't make it right. Josiah stood abruptly. That's enough, Thaddeus. Josiah, I'm just trying to help. I said enough. Josiah's voice was hard. Clara and Rosie are guests in my home, that's all. And if the town has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. Doc Webb sighed heavily. I hope you know what you're doing, old friend. I always do. After the doctor left, Clara stood by the window watching his horse disappear down the snowy road. Rosie had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhausted by the morning's drama. I'm sorry, Josiah said quietly, coming to stand beside her. I shouldn't have yelled. You were right, though. Clara's voice was tired. I can't take her back out there. It would kill her. So stay. And bring scandal down on your head. You heard what Doc Webb said. The whole town is already talking. Let them talk. Clara turned to face him. Why? Why would you risk your reputation for us? You don't even know us. Josiah was quiet for a long moment. His storm-gray eyes held hers, searching for something. You want the truth? He asked finally. Please. The truth is, I've spent 2 years wanting to die. Not actively, I ain't a coward, but passively, not caring if I lived or died, not caring about anything. He paused. Then I saw your daughter in that store, and I felt something I hadn't felt since the fire. What purpose? The word came out rough. For the first time in 2 years, I had a reason to do something, a reason to help someone, a reason to... He stopped, swallowed hard. A reason to live. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. You saved us, she whispered. But I think maybe we're saving you too. Josiah's hand came up slowly, hesitantly, and brushed a tear from her cheek. His touch was gentle despite the roughness of his fingers. Maybe that's how it's supposed to work, he said quietly. Maybe we save each other. The moment stretched between them, fragile, tender, full of possibility. Then Rosie's voice shattered it. Mama, I'm hungry again. Clara laughed despite her tears. I guess that's a good sign. The best sign. Josiah's voice was lighter now. I'll make some soup. He turned toward the kitchen, but Clara caught his arm. Josiah. He looked back at her. Thank you. For everything. Something flickered in his eyes, something warm and dangerous and utterly terrifying. You're welcome, Clara. He disappeared into the kitchen and Clara stood there, her heart pounding with something she didn't dare name. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room bed listening to Rosie's soft breathing beside her. The house was quiet, peaceful. Safe. So why couldn't she settle? She slipped out of bed, carefully pulling a blanket around her shoulders, and crept downstairs. The fire in the hearth had burned low, but the embers still gave off enough light to see. And enough light to see Josiah sitting in his chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. Can't sleep either, Clara asked softly. He didn't seem surprised by her presence. Never can, not on nights like this. Nights like what? Nights when the dreams come. Clara moved to sit in the chair across from him. What do you dream about? Josiah took a long drink of whiskey. The fire, Mary screaming, Lily crying for her papa. His voice was hollow. I dream about breaking down that door, over and over. But in the dreams, I always reach them in time. I carry them out. We stand in the yard and watch the house burn together. He paused. And then I wake up. And remember, that's not how it happened. Clara's heart ached for him. How did it happen? The way it always happens. A spark from the chimney. Dry wood. By the time I smelled smoke, the whole upstairs was burning. His hand tightened on the glass. I tried to break down the door, but the heat. I could hear them screaming Clara. I could hear my little girl calling for me. And I couldn't get to her. I couldn't... His voice broke. Clara moved without thinking. She crossed the space between them and knelt beside his chair, her hand covering his. You tried, she whispered. That's what matters. It doesn't matter. They're still dead. It matters to me. Clara squeezed his hand. And it would matter to them. Mary wouldn't want you to torture yourself like this. Neither would Lily. Josiah looked down at her, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. How do you know? Because I knew Samuel. And I know he wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life drowning in grief. He'd want me to live, to be happy. She paused. Your family loved you, Josiah. They wouldn't want this for you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Josiah's free hand came up and cupped her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Clara. Don't. She closed her eyes. Don't say anything. Not yet. Why not? Because everything is too complicated. Because we've known each other for one day. Because there's a whole town that wants to tear us apart. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. Because I'm terrified. Of what? of feeling something, of letting myself hope, of losing someone again. Her voice cracked. I can't survive that, Josiah. Not again. His thumb stroked her cheek softly. What if I promised you wouldn't have to? You can't promise that. Nobody can. Then let me promise this instead. Josiah leaned forward, his forehead touching hers. Let me promise that whatever happens, I'll fight for you. For both of you. With everything I have. Until my last breath. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Why would you do that? Because you and Rosie are the first good thing that's happened to me in 2 years. And I ain't letting that go without a fight. She should pull away. She should go back upstairs, back to her daughter, back to safety. Instead, she leaned into his touch. This is madness, she whispered. Probably. It's too fast. Definitely. The town will never accept it. I don't care about the town. Josiah. Clara. His voice was fierce and tender all at once. I ain't asking you to love me. I ain't asking you to marry me or make promises you can't keep. I'm just asking you to stay, to give this a chance, to let me prove that not all men are like the ones who hurt you. She looked into his storm-gray eyes and saw something she'd stopped believing in. Hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'll stay. I'll give it a chance. She pulled back slightly, needing distance to think. But slowly, carefully, for Rosie's sake. For Rosie's sake, he agreed. Clara stood, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. I should go back to bed. You should. But neither of them moved. Finally, Clara forced herself to turn away. She was halfway up the stairs when his voice stopped her. Clara. She looked back. Josiah stood by the fire, the light casting shadows across his weathered face. Thank you. For what? For staying, for talking, for... He paused. For reminding me what it feels like to want tomorrow to come. Clara's heart clenched. Good night, Josiah. Good night, Clara. She climbed the rest of the stairs and slipped back into bed beside Rosie. Her daughter stirred, mumbling sleepily. Mama. Shh, baby. Go back to sleep. Is everything okay? Clara pulled Rosie close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. Yeah, baby. I think maybe everything is finally going to be okay. But as she drifted off to sleep, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning. And she was right, because 3 miles away, in the finest room of the Mineral Springs Hotel, a well-dressed man was reading a telegram by lamplight. His name was Cornelius Whitmore, and he had just learned where his brother's widow was hiding. The telegram crumpled in his fist as his jaw tightened with cold determination. Found you, he whispered into the darkness. The knock came at dawn. Clara's eyes flew open, her heart already racing before she was fully awake. Beside her, Rosie slept on undisturbed. But Clara had learned to sleep light these past 3 months. Survival demanded it. She heard Josiah's boots on the stairs, heavy, purposeful. Then his voice low and hard. Who's there? A muffled response. Words Clara couldn't make out. Then Josiah's voice again, sharp as a blade. You ain't welcome here. Clara was out of bed and down the stairs before she could think. She found Josiah standing in the open doorway, his massive frame blocking whoever stood on the porch. Cold air rushed past him into the house. Josiah, what's happening? He didn't turn. Go back upstairs, Clara. I asked you a question. A familiar voice came from outside. Hello, Clara. It's been a long time. Clara's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. She'd heard it at her wedding, at Samuel's funeral, in her nightmares ever since. Cornelius. Josiah stepped aside, just enough for Clara to see the man on the porch. Cornelius Whitmore looked exactly as she remembered, thin, sharp-featured, dressed in clothes too fine for Wyoming territory. His cold eyes swept over her with something that might have been satisfaction. "You're a difficult woman to find, sister-in-law." "Don't call me that." Clara's voice came out stronger than she felt. "What are you doing here?" "I've come for my niece." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. "What?" Cornelius pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. "I have papers here signed by Judge Morrison in Cheyenne. As Rosie's closest male relative, I have the legal right to petition for guardianship." "Guardianship?" Clara's voice rose. "I'm her mother. A mother who can't provide for her child." Cornelius's eyes flickered past her, taking in Josiah's house. A mother who's living in sin with a stranger. A mother who had to be rescued from the streets like a common beggar. Josiah stepped forward, and Clara saw Cornelius flinch despite himself. "Mister, I don't know who you are," Josiah said quietly, "but you've got about 10 seconds to get off my property before I throw you off." Cornelius straightened his spine, attempting dignity. "I'm Cornelius Whitmore, Samuel's brother, and I have every legal right to—" "You have the legal right to leave, now." "This isn't over." Cornelius's jaw tightened. "I've already spoken to Sheriff Gaines. He's gathering a delegation as we speak. By this afternoon, this entire town will be at your door, Mr. McAllister, and they won't leave until proper arrangements have been made for that child." Clara's stomach dropped. "You went to the town?" "I went to people who understand decency." Cornelius's voice dripped with false righteousness. "Something you clearly don't." Josiah moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment, he was standing beside her. The next, he had Cornelius by the collar, lifting him off his feet. "Listen to me carefully," Josiah growled. "That woman in there is more decent than you'll ever be. She nearly died trying to keep her daughter alive while people like you sat in your fancy offices doing nothing. If you think I'm gonna let you waltz in here and take her child, you don't know me at all." "Let me go." Cornelius's voice was strangled. "This is assault." "No, this is a warning." Josiah released him, and Cornelius stumbled backward. "You come back here, you come with the sheriff, you come with the whole damn town, I don't care. That little girl stays with her mama. End of story." Cornelius straightened his coat with shaking hands. His face had gone pale, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "We'll see about that, Mr. McAllister. We'll see." He turned and walked to his horse, mounting with what dignity he had left. Clara watched him ride away until he was just a speck on the snowy road. Then her knees gave out. Josiah caught her before she hit the floor. "Easy, I've got you." "He's going to take her," Clara's voice broke. "He's going to take my baby." "Nobody's taking anyone." "You don't understand." She gripped his shirt, her fingers twisted in the fabric. "Cornelius is a lawyer. He has connections. If he's got papers from a judge, papers don't mean anything out here. What matters is what's right. Since when has what's right mattered to men like him?" Josiah's jaw tightened. He didn't have an answer. "Mama." Clara looked up to see Rosie standing at the bottom of the stairs, her wooden horse clutched to her chest. Her small face was creased with confusion and fear. Why was the mean man yelling? Clara forced herself to stand across the room to kneel in front of her daughter with a smile she didn't feel. "It's nothing, baby. Just a grown-up disagreement." "Is he going to take me away?" Clara's heart shattered. "No, baby. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Promise." Clara pulled Rosie into her arms, holding her so tight it hurt. "I promise, sweetheart. Mama promises." Over Rosie's shoulder, she met Josiah's eyes. He gave her a small nod, a promise of his own. But Clara had learned not to trust promises. Promises didn't feed hungry children. Promises didn't keep roofs over heads. Promises didn't stop men like Cornelius Whitmore. Only action did. The morning passed in tense silence. Clara tried to keep Rosie occupied while Josiah paced the house like a caged animal. Every few minutes he'd go to the window and stare down the road. "They'll come," he said finally around midday. He wasn't bluffing. "The town will come." Clara looked up from where Rosie was playing with her wooden horse. What do? We stand our ground. Against everyone. Against anyone who tries to hurt you. Clara shook her head slowly. This isn't your fight, Josiah. You barely know us. Why would you? Because it's the right thing to do? He turned from the window, his storm-gray eyes fierce. Because 2 years ago I lost everyone I loved, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Because I've spent every day since then, wishing I could go back and fight harder, be stronger, save them somehow. His voice cracked. I couldn't save Mary and Lily. But I can save you. I can save Rosie. And I'll be damned if I let anyone take that chance from me. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. Josiah, I know we've only known each other a few days. I know this is crazy. I know none of it makes sense. He crossed the room to her, taking her hands in his massive, gentle ones. But I also know that when I saw you in that store, starving, desperate, fighting for your child with everything you had, something woke up in me. Something I thought died in that fire. What? Hope. He squeezed her hands. You gave me hope, Clara. You and Rosie, and I ain't giving that up without a fight. Before Clara could respond, Rosie's voice cut through the moment. Mama, there's horses coming. Clara's heart stopped. She ran to the window. Sure enough, a group of riders was approaching, at least a dozen of them. She could make out Sheriff Gaines at the front, and beside him, Cornelius Whitmore. They're here, she whispered. Josiah was already moving. He grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and checked the chamber. Josiah, no. Clara grabbed his arm. You can't shoot the sheriff. I ain't planning to shoot anyone, but I ain't letting them walk in here like they own the place either. He headed for the door. Clara followed, her heart pounding. Rosie, stay inside, she called over her shoulder. Don't come out no matter what you hear. But Mama, stay inside. The riders had stopped in front of the house. Clara counted 12 of them. The sheriff, Cornelius, Mrs. Harper from the general store, 3 women she recognized from church, and several men whose names she didn't know. Sheriff Gaines dismounted first. Afternoon, Josiah. Sheriff. Josiah's voice was cold. We need to talk about the situation here. There ain't no situation. I'm afraid there is. Sheriff Gaines looked uncomfortable, but his voice was firm. Mr. Whitmore here has legal documents claiming custody of the child, and these good people, he gestured to the townfolk, have concerns about the moral implications of Mrs. Whitmore's living arrangements. Mrs. Harper stepped forward, her face twisted with righteous anger. It's a scandal, Josiah McAllister. An unmarried woman living under your roof. What kind of example does that set for our children? The kind that says we help people in need, Josiah replied evenly. Something your Christian town seems to have forgotten. Mrs. Harper's face reddened. How dare you? I watched you turn away a starving mother and her dying child. Josiah's voice cut like a knife. I watched you refuse to sell her bread ends for 7 cents while her daughter was too weak to cry. So don't you dare lecture me about morality, ma'am. Not when you got so little of it yourself. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the townspeople shifted uncomfortably. Cornelius pushed to the front. This is all very touching, but it's beside the point. I have legal custody papers. The child comes with me. Over my dead body. Clara's voice surprised even herself. Cornelius smiled coldly. That can be arranged. Josiah stepped forward, his rifle held loosely but ready. You threatening her? I'm stating facts. Cornelius held up his papers. Judge Morrison has declared Clara an unfit mother, unable to provide basic necessities, engaging in immoral behavior. As Rosie's closest male relative, I have been granted custody. It's all legal and proper. Legal don't mean right. It doesn't have to be right, it just has to be binding. Clara felt the world spinning. This couldn't be happening. She'd fought so hard, survived so much, and now, "Mama!" Everyone turned. Rosie stood in the doorway despite Clara's orders. Her small face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Rosie, I told you to stay inside. I don't want to go with him." Rosie's voice trembled. "He's mean. He looks like Papa, but he's not Papa. I want to stay with you and Mr. Mountain." Cornelius's expression flickered just for a moment with something that might have been pain. "Rosie, I'm your uncle. I want to take care of you." "You never came before." Rosie's voice was stronger now, clearer. "When we were hungry, you never came. When Mama cried, you never came. Mr. Mountain came. Mr. Mountain gave us food and a warm house, and he makes Mama smile. I want to stay here." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara saw several of the townspeople exchange uncomfortable glances. Even Mrs. Harper looked uncertain. Sheriff Gaines cleared his throat. "The child has made her feelings clear. Children don't know what's best for them," Cornelius snapped. "That's why adults make decisions." "Then why ain't you listening to her mother?" Josiah's voice was quiet but deadly. "Her mother wants her to stay. Her mother has taken care of her all her life. Her mother nearly died trying to keep her fed. Her mother couldn't keep her fed." Cornelius's voice dripped with contempt. "That's why we're here." "No." Clara stepped forward, pulling Rosie behind her protectively. "We're here because the town threw us out. We're here because the mining company didn't care if we lived or died. We're here because people like you only show up when there's something to take." Clara. "Where were you when Samuel died? Where were you when they threw us out of our home? Where were you when I was selling my wedding ring to buy bread?" Her voice rose with every question. "You didn't answer my letters. You didn't send help. You let us starve for 3 months, and now you show up with papers and righteousness and expect me to hand over my daughter." "I didn't receive your letters," Cornelius said stiffly. "Liar." The word cracked through the air like a whip. "I sent 5 letters to your office in Cheyenne." Clara continued, her voice shaking with fury. 5 letters begging for help. I know you got them because your secretary wrote back to say you were too busy to respond." Cornelius's face went pale. "That's not—" "I still have the letter." Clara's voice was deadly quiet now. "Would you like me to show the sheriff? Show these good Christian people how you ignored your own brother's widow while she starved?" The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. One of the church women stepped forward. "Is this true, Mr. Whitmore? You ignored her letters?" There must have been some misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Josiah said, "is you thinking you can ride in here and take what ain't yours." Sheriff Gaines held up his hands. "All right, everyone, calm down. This is getting out of hand." "You're right, Sheriff." A new voice came from the back of the crowd. "It is." Everyone turned to see Doc Webb pushing his way forward on his old mare. "Thaddeus," Sheriff Gaines said warily, "this doesn't concern you." "The hell it doesn't." Doc Webb dismounted and walked toward the porch. "I've known Josiah McAllister for 10 years. He's the most decent man in this territory. And I've been treating that little girl. She was dying 3 days ago. Dying. Now she's standing here healthy and strong because this man took her in and cared for her." "That's not the issue here," Cornelius began. "It's exactly the issue." Doc Webb rounded on him. "You want to talk about fitness, about proper care. That child was 5 days from death when Clara brought her to Josiah's door. 5 days. And now look at her. Pink cheeks, bright eyes, laughing and playing. That's the work of a loving mother and a good man. What have you done, Mr. Whitmore? Besides show up with papers." Cornelius's face had gone from pale to red. "I don't have to justify myself to—" "Yes, you do." Doc Webb turned to face the crowd. "All of you. You come here with your moral outrage and your custody papers. But where were you when this woman needed help? Where were you when her child was starving? I didn't see any of you at my office asking how you could help." Mrs. Harper opened her mouth, but Doc Webb cut her off. Don't, Eugenia. I was in your store that day. I saw you turn her away. 7 cents. She had 7 cents and a dying daughter, and you couldn't sell her bread ends. His voice dripped with contempt. So don't you dare stand there and lecture about morality. The crowd had gone silent. Sheriff Gaines looked deeply uncomfortable. Be that as it may, Doc, there's still the matter of the legal papers. Papers that were obtained through fraud. Doc Webb pulled a telegram from his pocket. I sent word to a friend of mine in Cheyenne this morning. Judge Morrison says he never signed any custody documents. Mr. Whitmore forged his signature. The collective gasp was audible. Cornelius's face went white. That's a lie. Is it? Doc Webb held up the telegram. Judge Morrison's exact words, no such papers were issued by my office. Any documents bearing my signature in this matter are fraudulent. Sheriff Gaines turned to Cornelius, his expression hardening. You want to explain this, Mr. Whitmore? There must be some mistake. The only mistake, Josiah said quietly, was you thinking you could get away with it. Sheriff Gaines drew himself up. Cornelius Whitmore, you're under arrest for fraud and forgery. You can't do this. Cornelius's composed facade finally cracked. She's my brother's child. I have a right. You have the right to remain silent. Sheriff Gaines nodded to 2 of his deputies. Take him. Clara watched as Cornelius was dragged off his horse and bound. He struggled, shouting threats and protests, but the deputies held him firm. As they led him away, Cornelius turned back to Clara. His eyes burned with hatred. This isn't over, he snarled. I'll be back. That child belongs with family, not with some broken-down rancher playing house. Josiah stepped forward, placing himself between Cornelius and Clara. That child has a family, right here. And if you ever come near them again, I'll make sure you regret it. Cornelius spat at his feet. You'll regret this, McAllister. All of you will. The deputies hauled him away. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Several of the townspeople looked ashamed. Others just looked confused. Sheriff Gaines removed his hat and turned to Clara. Ma'am, I apologize. We were wrong to come here like this. Clara didn't trust her voice. She simply nodded. And Josiah. The sheriff met his eyes. I know we've had our differences, but you're a good man. I'm sorry we doubted that. Josiah's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. One by one, the townspeople mounted their horses and rode away. Mrs. Harper was the last to leave. She paused at the edge of the yard, looking back at Clara with an expression that might have been regret. I was wrong, she said quietly. About you. About a lot of things. Clara met her eyes. Yes, you were. Mrs. Harper flinched, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded and rode away. Finally, only Doc Webb remained. Well, he said, dismounting and walking toward the porch. That was more excitement than I've had in years. Clara laughed despite herself. It came out half hysterical, but it was still a laugh. How did you know about the forged papers? I didn't. Doc Webb smiled slightly. I just guessed, but I figured a man who ignores his starving sister-in-law isn't above forgery. You bluffed. I sent a real telegram. I just didn't wait for the answer. His eyes twinkled. Turns out I guessed right. Josiah shook his head slowly. You're a dangerous man, Thaddeus Webb. Only to people who deserve it. Rosie tugged on Clara's dress. Mama is the mean man going to jail. Clara knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms. Yes, baby. He's going to jail. Good. Rosie's voice was firm. He was bad. Yes, he was. But we're safe now. Clara looked up at Josiah, then at Doc Webb, then back at her daughter. Yes, baby, we're safe. But even as she said the words, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't quite true. Cornelius was gone, but his words echoed in her mind. This isn't over. She prayed she was wrong. That night after Rosie was asleep, Clara found Josiah on the porch staring up at the stars. "You should be inside," she said softly. "It's freezing." "I needed air." Clara moved to stand beside him. "Thank you. For today. For everything." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I meant what I said. About fighting for you." "I know." "No, I mean—" He turned to face her, his storm-gray eyes intense. "Clara, I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for a few days, but I can't stop thinking about what almost happened today. What could still happen?" Clara's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" "Those papers were fake, but Cornelius was right about one thing. The law ain't on our side. If someone else comes, someone with real authority, they could still take Rosie. Unless what?" Josiah took a deep breath. "Unless we gave them nothing to complain about." Clara felt the world tilt. "Josiah, are you?" "I am asking you to marry me." The words hung in the cold air between them. "I know it's too fast." Josiah continued, his voice unsteady. "I know you barely know me. I know there's 100 reasons to say no. But Clara, I can't lose you. Either of you. And if marriage is what it takes to keep you safe, then I'm asking." Clara's throat was too tight to speak. Josiah's face fell slightly. "You don't have to answer now. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that—" "Yes." He blinked. "What?" "Yes. Josiah McAllister." Clara's voice shook, but her eyes were steady. "I'll marry you." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Josiah's massive arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and Clara buried her face in his chest. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her hair. "No." She laughed softly. "But I'm tired of being sure. I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of being alone." She pulled back to look at his face. "You saved us, Josiah. You gave us hope when we had nothing. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I started to love you." His breath caught. "You love me. I love you." The words came easier than she expected. "I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. I love you." Josiah's hands cupped her face gently. "I love you too, Clara. I think I have since the moment I saw you fighting for your daughter with 7 cents and a broken heart." He kissed her, then soft, sweet, full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Clara was crying. "Happy tears," she explained, wiping her cheeks. Josiah smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. "Happy tears are good. The best kind." They stood together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel overhead. And somewhere in the darkness, watching from the tree line at the edge of the property, a figure on horseback observed them. His face was hidden in shadow, but his intentions were clear. Cornelius Whitmore had escaped the deputies, and he wasn't finished yet. Clara woke to Rosie's screams. She was out of bed before her eyes fully opened, her heart slamming against her ribs. The bedroom was dark, cold, wrong. "Rosie!" Clara's voice tore through the silence. "Rosie, where are you?" The screaming had stopped. That was worse. Clara ran into the hallway, nearly colliding with Josiah. He had his rifle in his hands, and his face was ghost white. "She's not in her room," he said. "Clara, she's not." A voice came from downstairs. Cold, familiar, triumphant. "Looking for someone." Clara's blood turned to ice. She flew down the stairs, Josiah right behind her. In the front room, illuminated by a single lamp, stood Cornelius Whitmore. His clothes were torn. His face was scratched and bleeding. And in his arms, he held Rosie. Her daughter was crying silently, her small body trembling against Cornelius's chest. He had one hand clamped over her mouth and the other wrapped around her waist. "Let her go." Clara's voice came out as a whisper, then louder. "Let her go." "Not a chance." Cornelius's eyes were wild, unhinged. The composed lawyer was gone. In his place stood something desperate and dangerous. "You took everything from me. My reputation, my career, my freedom. Now I'm taking something from you." Josiah raised the rifle. "Put the child down. Now." "Shoot me, and you hit her." Cornelius shifted Rosie in front of him like a shield. "Try me, rancher. See what happens." Clara felt her legs trembling. "Cornelius, please. She's just a little girl. Whatever you want, just—" "What I want is justice." His voice cracked. "I want what's rightfully mine. Samuel was my brother. His child should be mine. His widow should be mine. Everything he had should have come to me. I was never yours." Clara's voice shook with fury. "I married Samuel because I loved him, not because of what he had, not because of family obligation, because I loved him. And look where that love got you." Cornelius laughed bitterly. "Starving in the streets, begging for scraps, selling yourself to the first man who offered you a warm bed." Josiah moved forward, his hands white-knuckled on the rifle. "You watch your mouth." "Or what?" Cornelius pressed Rosie tighter against him. "You'll shoot through a child to get to me, I don't think so." Rosie's eyes found Clara's. They were huge with terror, pleading. "Mama!" She whimpered around Cornelius's hand. "Mama, help me." Something inside Clara snapped. "You want me." She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "Fine. Take me. Let Rosie go and I'll come with you willingly. No fight, no resistance. Just let my daughter go." "Clara, no." Josiah's voice was sharp. "Stay out of this." She didn't look at him. Couldn't look at him. If she did, she'd lose her nerve. "Cornelius, you said you wanted Samuel's widow. Here I am. Take me. Leave Rosie with Josiah. That's the deal." Cornelius studied her face, searching for the trick. "You'd really do that? Give yourself up for her?" "She's my daughter. I'd do anything for her." Something flickered in Cornelius's eyes. Something that might have been uncertainty. "Mama, no." Rosie struggled against his grip. "Don't go with him. Don't leave me." "Baby, it's okay." Clara's voice cracked. "Mama's going to fix everything. Mr. Mountain will take care of you. He'll keep you safe." "I don't want you to go." Rosie was sobbing now. "I want you to stay. Please, Mama, please." Clara felt tears streaming down her own face. "I love you, Rosie. More than anything in this world. That's why I have to do this." She took another step toward Cornelius. "Clara, don't." Josiah's voice was desperate now. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Clara kept her eyes on Cornelius. "Do we have a deal me for her?" Cornelius hesitated. His grip on Rosie loosened slightly. "How do I know you won't run?" "Because I'm giving you my word, and unlike you, I keep my promises." The silence stretched. Then Cornelius nodded slowly. "Fine. Come here. Slowly." Clara moved toward him one step at a time. Her heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Behind her she heard Josiah making a sound of anguish. "Clara, please. Take care of her, Josiah." She didn't turn around. "Promise me you'll take care of her." "I promise, but Clara, promise me." "I promise." His voice broke. "I promise." Clara was 3 feet from Cornelius now. 2 feet. 1. "Let her go," she said quietly. Cornelius released Rosie. The little girl stumbled forward, but Clara caught her, pulling her into a fierce hug. "I love you, baby," she whispered against Rosie's hair. "I love you so much. Go to Mr. Mountain now. Go. Mama. Go!" Rosie ran to Josiah, who scooped her up with his free arm. His eyes never left Clara's face. Cornelius grabbed Clara's wrist, yanking her against him. "Now you're mine." Clara didn't resist. She let him pull her toward the door, keeping her eyes on Josiah and Rosie until the last possible moment. "Clara?" Josiah's voice was raw, broken. "I'll find you. I swear to God I'll find you." "I know." She managed a small smile. "Take care of our girl." "Our girl." The words hung in the air as Cornelius dragged her out into the cold night. Josiah stood frozen, Rosie sobbing in his arms. Every instinct screamed at him to chase after them, to fight, to do something. But if he left Rosie alone, even for a moment... "Mr. Mountain," Rosie's voice was muffled against his chest. "You have to save her. You have to save Mama." "I will, little one. I will. Promise." Josiah looked out into the darkness where Clara had disappeared. His jaw set with grim determination. "I promise." He set Rosie down and knelt to her level. "Listen to me carefully. I need you to be very brave. Can you do that?" Rosie nodded, her face streaked with tears. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe, to Doc Webb's house. Then I'm going to bring your mama back. Do you understand?" "But what if the mean man hurts her?" Josiah's hands clenched. "He won't. I won't let him." "How do you know?" "Because I love your mama." The words came out before he could stop them. "And I ain't gonna let anyone hurt the people I love. Not ever again." Rosie stared at him with those big, trusting eyes. "You really love her. More than anything." "Then you have to save her, Mr. Mountain. You have to." "I will." Josiah stood and grabbed his coat. "Now come on, we need to move fast." The ride to Doc Webb's house was the longest 15 minutes of Josiah's life. He pushed the horses hard. Rosie clutched tight in front of him, her small body shivering against his chest. Doc Webb answered the door in his nightshirt, his eyes widening at the sight of them. "Josiah." "What in God's name?" "Cornelius took Clara. I need you to watch Rosie." "Took her how?" "No time to explain." Josiah handed Rosie down to the doctor. "Just keep her safe. Please, Thaddeus. Keep her safe." Doc Webb's face hardened with understanding. "Go. Find her. I've got the little one." Josiah was already turning his horse. "If I don't come back..." "You'll come back." Doc Webb's voice was firm. "You'll come back with Clara. Now go." Josiah spurred his horse into the darkness. He knew where Cornelius would go. The man was smart enough to know he couldn't stay in the territory. He'd head for the train station at Miller's Crossing. It was the only way out that didn't involve days of riding through winter country. If Josiah pushed hard, he could cut them off. If. The word echoed in his mind as he rode. If he was fast enough. If he guessed right. If he wasn't already too late. Clara. Her face swam before him. Her strength. Her fire. The way she'd looked at him when she said yes to his proposal. "I love you, Josiah McAllister." He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not when he'd finally found something worth living for. The wind cut through his coat like a knife, but Josiah barely felt it. All he felt was fear. Fear and fury, and a desperate burning hope. "Hold on, Clara," he thought. "Just hold on. I'm coming." Clara's wrists were raw from the rope. Cornelius had bound her hands behind her back the moment they were out of sight of the ranch, then thrown her onto his horse like a sack of grain. Now they were riding hard through the darkness, the cold wind stealing her breath. "Where are you taking me?" she shouted over the sound of hooves. "Somewhere your rancher will never find you." Cornelius's voice was manic, unstable. "Somewhere we can start fresh, just you and me." "You're insane." "I'm practical." His arm tightened around her waist. "Samuel always got everything. The charm, the luck, The pretty wife? Well, now it's my turn. I'll never be yours. Clara's voice dripped with contempt. Even if you drag me to the ends of the earth, I'll never be yours. You will be. His breath was hot against her ear. Eventually, you'll learn to be grateful. Just like you learned to be grateful to your rancher. Josiah is twice the man you'll ever be. The slap came without warning. Clara's head snapped to the side, her cheek exploding with pain. Don't say his name. Cornelius's voice had gone cold. Don't ever say his name again. Clara tasted blood. But she didn't cry. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. He'll find me, she said quietly. He'll find me, and when he does, you'll regret ever being born. Cornelius laughed. He's a rancher, Clara, not a tracker. By the time he figures out where we went, we'll be 3 states away. You don't know him. And you do? You've known him a week. I know enough. Clara's voice was steady despite the terror in her heart. I know he's the kind of man who doesn't give up, who fights for what he loves, who would walk through hell itself to protect his family. His family? Cornelius snorted. You're not his family. You're a stray he picked up off the street. I'm going to be his wife. The words stopped Cornelius cold. What did you say? He proposed. Last night. And I said yes. Clara turned her head to look at him, and despite everything she smiled. So, you can take me wherever you want, Cornelius. But I'll always belong to him. Always. Cornelius's face twisted with rage. For a moment Clara thought he might hit her again. Then his expression shifted. Calculating. Cruel. Then I suppose we'll have to make sure there's nothing left for him to find. Clara's blood ran cold. What do you mean? I mean accidents happen, Clara. Especially to women who don't know their place. Before she could respond, a sound split the night. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. Cornelius's head whipped around. What the... A figure emerged from the darkness ahead of them. Massive. Unmistakable. Blocking the road like a mountain refusing to move. Josiah. Let her go, Cornelius. His voice carried across the distance, steady and deadly. This is your only warning. Cornelius yanked his horse to a stop. How did you... Doesn't matter how. What matters is what happens next. Josiah's rifle was aimed squarely at Cornelius's chest. You can let her go and ride away, or you can die here in the cold. Your choice. You won't shoot, not with her this close. Try me. Clara felt Cornelius's heart racing against her back, felt his uncertainty, his fear. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice shook. Am I? Josiah's finger tightened on the trigger. You took the woman I love. You threatened my family. You think there's anything in this world that would stop me from putting you down like the animal you are? Clara held her breath. Cornelius's arm loosened around her waist. Just slightly. Just enough. Clara threw her weight to the side. She hit the ground hard, her bound hands unable to break her fall. Pain exploded through her shoulder, but she rolled, getting clear of the horse, getting clear of Cornelius. The gunshot cracked through the night. Clara screamed. When she looked up, Cornelius was slumped over his horse's neck. Blood bloomed across his shoulder. The horse reared, throwing him to the ground. Then Josiah was there, pulling her up, cutting the ropes from her wrists. Are you hurt? Clara, are you hurt? She couldn't speak, couldn't think. She just threw her arms around him and held on. I've got you. His voice was rough against her hair. I've got you. You're safe now. Rosie. She's with Doc Webb. She's fine. She's safe. Clara sobbed against his chest. All the fear, all the terror, all the desperate hope, it all came pouring out. Josiah held her through it, his arms strong and steady. It's over, he murmured. It's over, Clara. He can't hurt you anymore. A groan came from the ground nearby. Cornelius was stirring, his hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder. His eyes found Clara's, and even now, even beaten and bleeding, they burned with hatred. "This isn't over," he gasped. "I'll come back. I'll always come back." Josiah released Clara and walked toward him. His face was carved from stone. "No," he said quietly. "You won't." He grabbed Cornelius by his wounded shoulder, making the man scream. "Listen to me carefully." Josiah's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm going to let you live, not because you deserve it, but because Clara doesn't need your death on her conscience. But if you ever come near her again, if you ever come near Rosie again, if you even think about my family, I will find you, and I will end you. Do you understand?" Cornelius whimpered. Yes, I understand." "Good." Josiah released him and stepped back. "Now get on your horse and ride. Don't stop until you're out of the territory, and don't ever come back." Cornelius scrambled to his feet, clutching his shoulder. He staggered toward his horse, managing to pull himself into the saddle. For a moment, he looked back at Clara. His face was a mask of pain and hatred and something else. Something that might have been regret. Then he rode away into the darkness. Clara watched until she couldn't see him anymore. Until the sound of hoofbeats faded to nothing. "Is it really over?" she whispered. Josiah pulled her back into his arms. "It's really over." "How did you find me?" "I know these lands, every trail, every shortcut." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And I would have searched forever if that's what it took." Clara looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears. "I love you." "I love you too." He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite their size. "And I meant what I said back there. You're my family now, you and Rosie, and I'll spend the rest of my life protecting you both. Even if it means chasing down madmen in the middle of the night. Especially then." Clara laughed through her tears. "Take me home, Josiah." "Yes, ma'am." He helped her onto his horse and climbed up behind her, his arms wrapped around her protectively. As they rode toward the warmth and safety of Broken Ridge, Clara leaned back against his chest and closed her eyes. Home. For the first time in months, the word didn't feel like a lie. Dawn was breaking when they reached Doc Webb's house. Rosie burst through the door before they even dismounted. "Mama, Mama!" Clara slid off the horse and caught her daughter in her arms. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I was so scared." Rosie's voice was muffled against Clara's neck. "I thought the mean man was going to hurt you." "He's gone, sweetheart. He's never coming back. Mr. Mountain saved you." Clara looked up at Josiah, who stood watching them with an expression of pure love. "Yes, baby, Mr. Mountain saved me." Rosie pulled back slightly, looking between them. "Does that mean he's really going to be my papa now?" Clara felt her heart swell. "Would you like that? More than anything?" Rosie's voice was solemn. "He makes you smile, Mama, and he makes good pancakes, and he's big enough to fight all the bad men in the world." Josiah laughed a real laugh, full and warm. "I don't know about all the bad men, little one, but I'll fight any that come near you and your mama. That's a promise." Rosie held out her arms to him. "Carry me." Josiah scooped her up like she weighed nothing. "Where to?" "Home." Rosie nestled against his chest. "I want to go home." Doc Webb appeared in the doorway, relief plain on his weathered face. "You found her." "I found her." Josiah's arm tightened around Clara's shoulders. "Thanks for watching, Rosie." "Anytime." Doc Webb's eyes moved to Clara. "You all right?" "I will be." Clara managed a smile. "Thanks to Josiah." "That man's been nothing but trouble since he saved your life." Doc Webb's voice was dry. "Couldn't have just let you starve in peace." Clara laughed despite everything. "No, he really couldn't." The ride back to Broken Ridge was quiet. Rosie fell asleep against Josiah's chest before they'd gone a mile. Clara rode beside him, her hand resting on his knee. "What are you thinking?" Josiah asked softly. "I'm thinking about what comes next." "The wedding, among other things." Clara looked at the lightening sky. "A week ago I was counting 7 cents and praying for a miracle. Now I'm engaged to a man who rode through the night to save me from a kidnapper. Life's funny that way. It's terrifying that way." She paused. "Josiah, are you sure about this? About us? We've known each other barely a week." "I've never been more sure of anything. Even after everything that happened tonight." Josiah was quiet for a moment. "Clara, before you came into my life, I was dead inside. I woke up every morning wishing I hadn't. I went through the motions of living without actually being alive. But then I saw you in that store, fighting for your daughter with everything you had and something in me. Woke up. Woke up like coming out of a long, cold winter." His voice was thick with emotion. "You and Rosie brought spring back into my life, and I ain't ever going to let that go." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I don't deserve you. You deserve everything, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you." They reached Broken Ridge as the sun crested the mountains. The house looked different in the morning light. Warmer, more welcoming, less like a shrine to the dead, and more like a home for the living. Josiah carried Rosie inside and laid her on the sofa, covering her with a blanket. The little girl stirred but didn't wake. "She's exhausted," Clara said softly. "We all are." "Josiah, Clara hesitated. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When Cornelius had me, when I thought I might never see you or Rosie again, I made myself a promise." "What kind of promise?" Clara took a deep breath. "I promised that if I survived, I'd stop being afraid, stop holding back, stop waiting for the other shoe to drop." She met his eyes. "I want to marry you, Josiah. Not someday. Not when things settle down. Now. Today. Before anything else can go wrong." Josiah's breath caught. "Clara, I know it's crazy. I know it's fast. But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself from happiness because I'm afraid it won't last." She took his hands in hers. "I love you. Rosie loves you. And I don't want to waste another moment pretending otherwise." For a long moment, Josiah just stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Well then," he said quietly, "I reckon we better go find a preacher." Clara laughed through her tears. "Just like that. Just like that." He pulled her into his arms. "I've been waiting my whole life for someone like you, Clara Whitmore. I ain't about to make you wait a moment longer." Their lips met in a kiss that sealed the promise, a promise of love, of family, of a future neither had dared to hope for. Outside, the sun continued to rise, bathing Broken Ridge in golden light. And inside, 2 broken hearts began to heal. The church bells rang at noon. Clara stood in the small room behind the altar, her hands trembling as she smoothed the fabric of her dress. It wasn't new. Martha Jennings had altered one of her own wedding dresses to fit, but it was clean and white and beautiful. "Mama, you look like a princess." Clara turned to find Rosie standing in the doorway, a crown of winter flowers in her hair. Her daughter's face was glowing with a happiness Clara hadn't seen since before Samuel died. "You think so, baby? Mr. Mountain is going to cry when he sees you." Rosie giggled. "He cries a lot for a big man." Clara laughed, despite her nerves. "That's because he has a big heart." "Is that why you love him?" "That's one of the reasons." Rosie crossed the room and took Clara's hand. "I'm glad you're marrying him, Mama. He makes everything feel safe." Clara knelt down to her daughter's level. "Are you really okay with this? With him being your papa now?" Rosie's face grew serious. "My real papa is in heaven. But Mr. Mountain, he loves us. He saved us. And he makes you smile again." She paused. I think real Papa would be happy. Don't you? Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Yeah, baby. I think he would be. A knock on the door made them both turn. Doc Webb poked his head in. Ladies, it's time. Clara's heart began to race. Already? The whole town's out there waiting, and Josiah looks like he's about to pass out from nerves. Doc Webb smiled. I reckon you better put him out of his misery. Clara took a deep breath. Then she took Rosie's hand. Let's go get married. The church was packed. Clara hadn't expected that. After everything, the scandal, the accusations, the midnight confrontation, she'd assumed most of the town would stay away. But as she walked down the aisle with Rosie beside her, she saw familiar faces everywhere. Martha Jennings was crying into her handkerchief. Sheriff Gaines stood near the back, his hat in his hands. Even Mrs. Harper was there, her expression softer than Clara had ever seen it. And at the altar, waiting for her, was Josiah. He looked different in his Sunday clothes. Less like the rough rancher who'd rescued her from starvation, and more like the man she was about to spend her life with. His storm-gray eyes were fixed on her face, and Clara saw tears already tracking down his weathered cheeks. Rosie had been right. He did cry a lot for a big man. Clara reached the altar and took her place beside him. Josiah's hand found hers warm and steady. You're beautiful, he whispered. You're crying. Can't help it. His voice cracked. Never thought I'd be standing here again. The minister, Reverend Thomas, a kind-faced man who'd arrived in Mineral Springs just last month, cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Josiah McAllister and Clara Whitmore in holy matrimony. Clara barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at Josiah, memorizing every line of his face, every gray hair at his temples, every scar that told the story of the man he was. Marriage is not entered into lightly, Reverend Thomas continued. It is a covenant between two souls, a promise to stand together through joy and sorrow, through plenty, and want through sickness and health. Josiah's hand tightened on hers. Josiah, do you take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part. Josiah's voice was rough with emotion. I do. Clara, do you take Josiah to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part? Clara looked into those storm-gray eyes, eyes that had wept for her, fought for her, loved her. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Thomas smiled. You may kiss your bride. Josiah pulled her close and kissed her. It was gentle, tender, full of promise. Behind them, the congregation erupted in applause. When they finally pulled apart, Rosie was tugging on Josiah's coat. Does this mean I can call you Papa now? Josiah knelt down and gathered her into his arms. You can call me whatever you want, little one. I want to call you Papa. Rosie wrapped her arms around his neck. Because that's what you are. Clara watched her husband hold her daughter and felt something she'd stopped believing in. Happiness. The reception was held at the ranch. People Clara barely knew had shown up with food and drink and congratulations. Tables had been set up, music was playing, and for the first time since she'd arrived in Mineral Springs, Clara felt like she belonged. Mrs. McAllister. Clara turned to find Mrs. Harper standing behind her. The older woman's face was uncertain, almost nervous. Mrs. Harper. I wanted to... Mrs. Harper hesitated. I wanted to apologize for how I treated you that day in the store, and for everything after. Clara studied her former tormentor. The rigid righteousness was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. Why? Why what? Why now? Why today? Mrs. Harper was quiet for a long moment. Because I watched you almost lose everything, twice. And I realized that I was part of the reason why. She paused. My son died 20 years ago. Fever took him. And after that, I think I forgot how to be kind. It was easier to judge than to feel. Clara felt her anger softening. I'm sorry about your son. And I'm sorry about your husband. And about everything I put you through. Mrs. Harper's voice cracked. You deserved better from this town. From me. Clara reached out and took the older woman's hand. We all deserve second chances, Mrs. Harper. That's what I've learned these past few weeks. Mrs. Harper's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, but I'm giving it anyway. Mrs. Harper squeezed her hand once, then walked away. Josiah appeared at Clara's side, 2 cups of punch in his hands. What was that about forgiveness? Clara took one of the cups. Turns out I'm getting good at it. You're good at a lot of things, Mrs. McAllister. Clara smiled at the name. I'm still getting used to that. You've got the rest of your life to get used to it. Josiah's arm wrapped around her waist. Speaking of which, I have something for you. A wedding gift. Something like that. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. I wanted to give you this in private, but I can't wait anymore. Clara opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, different from the one he'd put on her finger at the altar. It was my mother's, Josiah said quietly. She gave it to my father when they got married. Said it was a promise ring, a promise to always fight for each other no matter what. Josiah. I gave Mary a different ring when we married. This one I was saving. For someone special. His voice grew thick. For someone who needed to know that I'd fight for her until my last breath. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. Say you'll wear it. Of course I'll wear it. Josiah took the ring and slipped it onto her finger next to her wedding band. Now you've got 2 promises. One that I'll love you, and one that I'll fight for you. Clara threw her arms around his neck. I love you, Josiah McAllister. I love you too, Clara McAllister. They held each other as the party swirled around them, 2 broken people made whole by love. The celebration lasted well into the evening. As the sun began to set, Clara found herself standing on the porch, watching the last of the guests depart. Rosie had fallen asleep on the sofa inside, exhausted by the excitement of the day. Josiah came to stand beside her, his presence warm and solid. Hell of a day, he said quietly. Hell of a week. He laughed softly. That too. Clara leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Josiah, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever think about them, Mary and Lily? He was quiet for a long moment. Every day. But it's different now. Different how? Before you came, thinking about them felt like drowning. Like I was trapped at the bottom of a deep, dark well and couldn't find my way out. He paused. Now it feels more like remembering. Still sad, but not suffocating. I'm glad. You know what else is different? What? I don't feel guilty anymore. His voice was thick with emotion. For the longest time, I felt guilty for being alive, for surviving when they didn't, for wanting to be happy again. But now, he turned to face her. Now I think they'd want this for me. A second chance, a new family, a reason to keep going. Clara cupped his face in her hands. They would, Josiah. I know they would. How do you know? Because if things were reversed, if I'd been the one who died and Samuel had lived, I'd want him to find happiness again. I'd want Rosie to have a father who loved her. She paused. Love isn't a finite thing. It doesn't run out. Loving me doesn't mean you love them any less. Josiah's eyes glistened. When did you get so wise, Mrs. McAllister? I had a good teacher. She kissed him softly. He's tall, kind of grumpy, cries at the drop of a hat. Josiah laughed and pulled her close. You're never gonna let me live that down, are you? Never. They stood together in the fading light, wrapped in each other's arms. Josiah. Yeah. Thank you. For what? For seeing me that day in the store. For not walking past like everyone else. Her voice cracked. For giving me and Rosie a chance when nobody else would. I didn't have a choice. His voice was rough. Something in me recognized something in you. Two broken pieces that fit together. I couldn't have walked past you any more than I could have stopped breathing. That's very poetic for a rancher. I have my moments. Clara laughed. Then she grew serious again. I want you to know something. What? I don't just love you because you saved us. I don't just love you because you're kind and strong and good. I love you because of who you are, the man who couldn't put away his daughter's toys, the man who cries when he's happy, the man who fights for what's right, even when it costs him everything. She met his eyes. I love the broken parts of you just as much as the whole parts. Maybe more. Josiah's breath caught. Clara, I know we both came into this carrying ghosts. Samuel, Mary, Lily. They'll always be part of us. But I don't want to forget them. I want to honor them by being happy, by raising Rosie with all the love we have, by building a life that would make them proud. That's all I want too. Then we're going to be okay, Clara smiled. More than okay. Yeah. Josiah pressed his forehead against hers. We really are. The moment was interrupted by a small voice from the doorway. Mama, Papa. They turned to find Rosie standing there, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Hey, little one. Josiah's voice was gentle. What are you doing up? I had a dream. Rosie crossed the porch and climbed into Josiah's arms. A good dream. What kind of dream? I dreamed about a baby. Rosie yawned. A little brother. He had your eyes, Papa, and Mama's smile. Clara felt her heart skip. She and Josiah exchanged a glance. Is that so? Josiah's voice was carefully neutral. Mm-hmm. And in the dream, we were all together. You and Mama, and me, and the baby. And we were happy. Rosie nestled against his chest. Really, really happy. Clara moved closer, wrapping her arms around both of them. That sounds like a beautiful dream, baby. Can it come true, Mama? Rosie's voice was already fading with sleep. Can we have a baby brother? Clara looked at Josiah. His storm-gray eyes held a question and a hope. Maybe someday, sweetheart, Clara said softly. Maybe someday. Rosie smiled and closed her eyes. Within moments, she was asleep again. Josiah looked at Clara over their daughter's head. A baby. She's 4. She says a lot of things. But she's not wrong to want it. He hesitated. I mean, if we wanted. Clara felt a warmth spreading through her chest. Are you asking me if I want to have your baby Josiah McAllister? I reckon I am. On our wedding night. Seems like the right time. Clara laughed softly. Let's get through the first week of marriage before we start planning babies. Fair enough. But his eyes were shining. Though I wouldn't mind the practice. Josiah. What I'm just saying. Clara kissed him to shut him up. When she pulled back, they were both smiling. Take our daughter to bed, she said. Then come back to me. Yes, ma'am. She watched him carry Rosie inside her heart full to bursting. A week ago, she'd been counting 7 cents and praying for a miracle. Now she had a husband who loved her, a home that welcomed her, a future that stretched out before her full of possibility. God had answered her prayer, just not in the way she'd expected. 3 months later, Clara stood at the same kitchen window where she'd once watched Josiah teach Rosie to ride. Her hand rested on her belly, where a new life was growing. You're smiling. She turned to find Josiah watching her from the doorway. He'd been out checking the horses, and his cheeks were red from the cold. I'm happy. Good. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind. What are you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. How different things are now. Different good or different bad? Different miraculous? Clara leaned back against his chest. 3 months ago, I was dying. Rosie was dying. We had nothing and no one. And now I have everything. She turned in his arms to face him. A husband who loves me. A daughter who's thriving. A baby on the way. A home. A family. A life. Josiah's hand moved to her belly, his touch gentle and reverent. I still can't believe it's real. I know. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night convinced it was all a dream, that I'm still in that barn outside town freezing and starving and watching Rosie fade away. And then I feel you beside me, and I hear Rosie's laughter from down the hall, and I know it's real. Her voice cracked. I know I'm finally home. You are home. Josiah kissed her forehead. And you always will be. Papa. They turned as Rosie burst through the kitchen door, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Rosie, slow down, Clara said. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's wonderful. Rosie was practically bouncing. The baby horse was born, the one we've been waiting for. She's beautiful, Mama. She's brown with a white star on her forehead, and she's trying to walk already, and Doc Webb says she's the prettiest foal he's ever seen. Josiah laughed. Is that so? Yes. Come see Papa. Come see right now. All right. Josiah looked at Clara. You coming? Clara took Rosie's hand. Wouldn't miss it. They walked out to the barn together, Josiah with his arm around Clara's waist, Rosie skipping ahead and chattering about the new foal. Doc Webb was waiting by the stall, his weathered face creased with a smile. Congratulations, Josiah. She's a beauty. Josiah leaned on the stall door, looking at the newborn foal struggling to stand on wobbly legs. She is. What are you going to name her? Rosie asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Josiah was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Clara. Hope, he said softly. We're going to name her Hope. Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. Josiah. Because that's what she is. That's what all of this is. He pulled Clara close, one arm around her and one hand on her belly. Hope. Rosie tugged on Clara's dress. Mama, why are you crying? Clara laughed through her tears. Because I'm happy, baby. Remember, sometimes people cry when they're happy. Grown-ups are confusing. Yeah. Clara kissed the top of her daughter's head. We really are. They stood together in the barn, a family born from tragedy and saved by love, watching new life take its first steps. Outside, spring was coming. The snow was melting, the sun was shining, and on a ranch called Broken Ridge, 2 broken hearts had finally healed. Later that evening, after Rosie was asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, Clara and Josiah sat on the porch swing watching the stars emerge one by one. Josiah. Yeah. Do you believe in fate? He considered the question. I believe that sometimes when everything seems darkest, God puts people in your path for a reason. Whether that's fate or grace or just dumb luck, I don't know. Which was fate or grace or dumb luck? All 3. He pulled her closer. And the best decision I ever made. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. I used to be so angry. At God. At the world. At everyone who turned their backs on us. But now I think maybe everything happened for a reason. Samuel dying. The town rejecting us. All those terrible months of struggling. Maybe it all had to happen so I could end up here. With you. That's a hard thing to believe. I know. But it's easier than believing it was all meaningless. She paused. Do you think they're watching Mary and Lily Samuel? Josiah was quiet for a long time. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think they're up there somewhere looking down and smiling. Maybe they're the ones who brought us together. Maybe they are. Clara smiled. I like that idea. 4 people in heaven conspiring to make 2 broken people on earth fall in love. Sounds like something Lily would do. Josiah's voice was thick with emotion. She was always trying to fix things. People, animals, broken toys. She had the biggest heart. Like her father. I don't know about that. I do. Clara looked up at him. Josiah, you're the best man I've ever known. Samuel was wonderful, but you saved us when you had no reason to. You loved us when you had every reason not to. You fought for us when the whole world was against us. I'd do it again, 1,000 times. I know you would. That's why I love you. Josiah kissed her slow, deep, full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Clara was crying again. Happy tears? Josiah asked. The happiest. He stood and offered her his hand. Come to bed, Mrs. McAllister. Is that an order? A request. A very sincere request. Clara laughed and took his hand. How can I refuse? They walked inside together, leaving the stars to keep watch over their sleeping daughter, their growing baby, their new life. And as she climbed the stairs beside her husband, Clara thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago. The woman counting 7 cents with trembling hands. The woman who'd given up on miracles. That woman felt like a stranger now, because that woman hadn't known the truth. The truth that Clara had learned in the arms of a gentle giant who cried at weddings and carved wooden dolls and loved with his whole broken heart. The truth was simple. Sometimes when you're at your lowest, when you've lost everything and everyone has turned away, that's when grace finds you. It doesn't come in the form you expect. It doesn't follow the timeline you want. But it comes. It came for Clara in the form of a man named Josiah McAllister, who walked into a general store on the anniversary of his worst memory and saw a dying child in her mother's arms. It came in the form of 7 cents that weren't enough but somehow were. It came in the form of a ranch called Broken Ridge, where broken things were made whole again. And it came in the form of love, unexpected, undeserved, unbreakable love that had carried her from the edge of death to the fullness of life. Clara paused at the top of the stairs and looked back at the house that was now her home. At the toys no longer gathering dust. At the table now set for 3, soon to be 4. At the portrait above the fireplace where Mary and Lily smiled their eternal smiles. Thank you, she whispered to them, for sharing him with me. Then she turned and walked into her bedroom where her husband was waiting. And she never looked back. Because Clara McAllister had learned the most important lesson of all. The past was for remembering. The future was for building. But the present was for living. And she intended to live every moment of it surrounded by the family she'd found when all hope seemed lost. 7 cents had brought her to Josiah's door. But love had brought her home.